The second thing is the media actually focused on this issue. The media actually focused on this issue. In 1968, 2 national Emmys went to news coverage of hunger. One was for NBC's spot coverage of the issue, and 2 was to CBS. They did a 50-minute long special, prime time. 50 minutes in prime time. They spent 10 months researching it. Imagine that today. You wouldn't spend 10 days researching a network news story today. Prime time showed a baby dying on the screen, a premature baby dying of malnutrition on the screen, and it galvanized the country. What happened? You had Richard Nixon, who, when he was elected, first basically denied 1969 there was hunger at all in America, and he said, well, maybe Senator McGovern, no relation to this McGovern, a spiritual relation, but no blood relation, said, oh, he's just going to run for president on this. Oh, and I don't even have to defend Senator McGovern. We're in the state he won. If only the other 49. Anyway, he said, oh, George McGovern, Nixon said, is only making up this issue. He's pretending there's hunger so he can use it to run against me in 1972. And he basically said this is a fake issue. Within a year, the president who was denying hunger existed, Richard Nixon, held the first and only White House conference on hunger. And it had significant results. Out of that, the modern food stamps program, under the pilot food stamps program, you actually had to buy the coupons, and really poor people couldn't afford it. The school breakfast program was basically a very small pilot program, and the women's, infants, and children program didn't even exist. And out of this conference led to the expansion of the modern safety net. What changed Richard Nixon? It was the media coverage and a mass political movement that forced him to care. I don't particularly think he became a more caring person. But I do have a subchapter in the book called Richard Nixon, Thief, Despot, Crook, and Great Hunger Leader, albeit reluctant. Then in the mid-1970s, Bob Dole, conservative Republican from Kansas, and George McGovern, liberal Democrat from South Dakota, teamed up to create the Modern Nutrition Assistance Safety Net. What happened? By the late 1970s, these programs all but wiped out mass domestic hunger in America. People who had gone down to the Mississippi Delta, who had gone to places like Bedford-Stuyvesant or Harlem in New York, who had gone to the Texas-Mexico border or Native American reservation, and found as late as the 1960s, third world style malnutrition in pockets there. It had been reduced since the Depression, reduced because of school meals programs, so it wasn't widespread everywhere in the country, but in poor neighborhoods throughout the country, there are still pockets of third world style malnutrition. You'd see the distended bellies like you would in Africa or North Korea or parts of Latin America. But by the late 1970s, these programs worked. They almost wiped out hunger in America. Yes, shocking, government programs worked. Are you detecting a theme here? What happened after that? Why do we have hunger in America today if we almost wiped it out? We went backwards. There are a lot of myths in America. You've heard the myth that the Great Society was a failure. Didn't work, big government programs don't work. I'm not going to re-argue all those battles. Not everything out of the Great Society War on Poverty was perfect, but the main point of the War on Poverty was to reduce poverty. And guess what? Between 1960 and 1974, the poverty rate in America was cut in half. It was cut in half. By and large, it was working. We just stopped fighting. If my yellow fever story is sort of, I call it a sort of secular parable, let me give you one more secular parable before I get to the answers. You want to hear the answers, not just the complaints. It's the parable of the bucket brigades. You know how we used to fight fires in America was buckets, one bucket at a time? And this is great. I was here for 2 days and enjoying wonderful, in Boston, had a great meal in the North End. That's why I like to fight hunger. I like food. Had a really great meal and a great cannoli afterwards. But we stopped in the Old State House Museum. That's why I have it. So we stopped in the Old State House Museum, and there it was, a firefighting bucket. Because that's how they used to fight fires. And it was literally one bucket at a time. One bucket at a time. These were incredible. They were the faith-based armies of compassion of their time. You didn't need a big government bureaucracy to have a bucket brigade. You didn't need a lot of regulations. You didn't need big government spending. These were volunteers. People just chipped in to do the right thing because it was the right thing to do for the community. It made us feel great when Alexis de Tocqueville came and to the new country said, what makes Americans different is you don't have these big, old-style government programs. You have citizens banding together. That's what made America great and different. The bucket brigades only had one teensy little problem. It's almost not worth talking about, but let me mention it to you. They didn't work. They didn't work. City after city burned to a crisp. The old State House ain't that old. There was an older one that burnt down. Chicago burned to a crisp. Sorry. Boston burned to ooh, you'll shoot me. At least I didn't say the Yankees. Boston burned to a crisp. Yeah, you've heard the story that Mrs. O'Leary's cow knocked over a lantern. That's what started the Chicago fire. Whether that's true or not, we do know Chicago burned to cinders. If you've read David McCulloch's book, 1776, about New York, huge fire burnt down New York City. Big earthquakes in Seattle and San Francisco. Earthquakes were really bad, don't get me wrong, but that wasn't what destroyed the city. It was the fires afterwards that destroyed the cities. Another test. How many of you have been in an American city that's burnt down? Where?
Here in Boston.
A whole city?
Well, no, not in my lifetime.
Oh, I'm sorry, in your lifetime.
Never.
No, yeah. Well,
Never.
what happened? I got another shocking answer. Government prevented fires from burning down cities. We developed fire safety codes. That's not made out of paper mache. They're sprinklers, they're fire doors. With the exception of a handful of corruption over the years, by and large, fire safety inspectors did their job. We replaced volunteer fire departments with professional fire departments. As wonderful as the volunteers are, at 3 a.m. in February, bucket brigades may not be able to show up, particularly if they're sick through yellow fever. We pay fire people to be on call at 3 a.m. in February. They are there when your house is burning. Even in rural and suburban areas, fire departments that are volunteers are funded and equipped by government. And you know what? We use modern technology. Because I'm kind of the twisted kind of guy that you see before you today, the product of this twisting got you a great book, if I don't say so myself. I calculated how much water a bucket brigade could deliver. I calculated it could deliver 60 gallons of water a minute. Pretty good. A modern fire pumping machine delivers 1,000 gallons of water a minute. Those bucket brigades aren't going to the second or third or fifth floor. Today, we do. Now I ask you, if your house is burning, which would you prefer? 60 gallons of water a minute, guaranteed because someone's paid to be there to 60 gallons of water a minute. A volunteer may or may not be able to show up. Their arms may or may not tire. The town well may or may not run out of water. Or professional fire department that's paid to be there, trained to do the job, and has professional equipment that delivers 1,000 gallons a minute. I'd be there with the professionals. Now you probably figured out, why am I telling you this unrelated story? Because when it comes to hunger, this country has reverted to the bucket brigades. Instead of a coordinated, funded, guaranteed safety net and real living wages, we've been sold on the bill of goods that handing one can at a time, one can at a time, one can at a drive at food drives is going to solve this massive problem affecting 36.2 million Americans, including 12 million children. The bucket brigades didn't work, and the brigades of the cans being handed one to each other are not working. Every year we're feeding more people at soup kitchens and food pantries, and every year more people are going hungry.